Hi, I'll be talking about the plot of The Great Gatsby. The plot of this story revolves around Daisy Buchanan. In the beginning of the story, all the characters, Jordan Baker, Tom, Nick, and Daisy, all have a dinner at the Buchanan's house where Tom gets a call from his mistress, Myrtle. Myrtle is from New York. And in the next chapter, we see more involvement with Myrtle as him and Nick head to New York, where they go to an adult apartment and do some things. We deal with a lot of greedy people in this story, but for some reason, people seem to like Gatsby more, even though he's extremely greedy. I mean, the whole story is him trying to steal Daisy from Tom Buchanan. Anyway, in the third chapter, Gatsby meets Nick Carraway. Nick Carraway is the narrator of the story, and Gatsby becomes his friend, but mainly uses him to get Daisy. The reason Gatsby and Daisy know each other is because before Gatsby went to war, him and Daisy were lovers before the war, but then once Gatsby returned, he didn't have enough money, so Daisy was tired of waiting around and she went to Tom. Gatsby then convinces Nick to invite Daisy to tea at Nick's house, while Gatsby will show up later without Daisy knowing. Daisy agrees to come to the tea where her and Gatsby catch up a little bit, and all three of them end up going to Gatsby's house where Gatsby just shows off his possessions to Daisy the whole time. A couple days after tea, Daisy and Tom end up going to Gatsby's house to go to one of his extravagant parties that he throws every night. As expected, Tom does not like Gatsby from the moment he sees him, and meanwhile at the party, Gatsby and Daisy sneak off and have a little romantic moment. Gatsby then tells Daisy that she needs to tell Tom that she never loved him. When Gatsby tells Daisy this, Daisy seems a little uneasy and then leaves the party with Tom. Gatsby ends up talking to Nick about the moment he had with Daisy, and he wishes that she could just remember the past. Nick tells him that you can't repeat the past, and Gatsby says, "Can't repeat the past? Why, of course you can." In the following chapters, Jordan Baker, who's a famous golfer, Nick, Tom, Daisy, and Gatsby all go to an apartment in New York where stuff goes down. Tom calls out the elephant in the room and tells Gatsby that he knows what he's trying to do. They get into a verbal argument about Daisy, and Gatsby tells Daisy to tell Tom that she never loved him, but she says that she loved both Gatsby and Tom at one time. This puts a weird feeling in the room, and Tom tells Daisy that he will treat her better from now on, but Gatsby tells Tom that Daisy will be leaving with him and staying with him, and not Tom. They all end up leaving the apartment, Gatsby and Daisy in one car, and Tom, Nick, and Jordan in the other. One important fact is when they went to the apartment, Tom drove Gatsby's car and got gas at George Wilson's gas stop, who is Myrtle Wilson's husband. On the way home though, Daisy and Gatsby went back in Gatsby's car and Daisy was driving. Something terrible went down as Myrtle, who was watching from the window of her house while George Wilson was yelling at her, saw Gatsby's car, thinking it was Tom, ran out into the middle of the road, and Daisy hit her. Gatsby tried to help swerve out of the way, but Daisy was driving too fast and Gatsby had too little time. They did not stop and they continued on home. While Tom was driving back with Nick and Jordan, he got out of his car and saw Myrtle dead. In that scene, Tom told George that Gatsby had killed Myrtle. Of course, Gatsby, being the gentleman that he is, would never throw Daisy under the bus and would say that it was him. That night when Tom got home, Daisy and Tom had a peaceful conversation in their house, but Gatsby stayed up and watched to make sure that Daisy did not get hurt. The next day, Nick came over to Gatsby's house and came to check on Gatsby, and he was not in great conditions. He had fired all of the servants from his house and was looking terribly sick. He invited Nick once again to go swimming in the pool with him, but Nick said he was busy. Nick then left, and as Gatsby was near the pool, George Wilson shot Gatsby. Gatsby then fell into his pool and died. In the process of all of this happening, George Wilson also killed himself. Gatsby had a funeral, and there were only two people, his dad and the librarian of his house. The Great Gatsby ended with a very bitter taste, but Nick made it better by praising Gatsby and calling the Buchanans people who just ruin other people's lives and hide under their money. Hi, I'll be doing View of Man and View of the American Dream. The view of man at this time was that man can do anything they put their mind to. In The Great Gatsby, this played a huge role throughout the story. For example, we see characters like Tom Buchanan and Jay Gatsby who achieved the wealth and status they want. For Tom, what he wanted was more of a wealthy status and recognition for achieving that wealthy status. He does not care about anyone in his life except for, well, him. Gatsby, on the other hand, worked for all of his possessions and had everything except for one thing. This is where the American dream comes into the story. The American dream at this time was the idea that people thought they had more than they actually had. They also became disillusioned with the American dream from before this one. They believed that the individual self-reliant would triumph. This was basically the exact character of Jay Gatsby. His American dream is getting Daisy Buchanan. Daisy is already married to Tom Buchanan, but she had a past romantic history with Gatsby before he went to war.
In The Great Gatsby, both symbolism and theme is heavily used to foreshadow upcoming events and give the reader something to look forward to later on in the book. The reader will always have that "what could this mean" thought in the back of their head at all times while reading the book. Arguably, the biggest symbol in the book is the green light that flashes on the end of Tom and Daisy Buchanan's dock. Fitzgerald makes it very apparent that the light is going to be important in the rest of the book. For an example, in chapter 1, Nick describes Mr. Gatsby reaching out towards the light. He stretched out his arms towards the dark water in a curious way, and far as I was from him, I could have sworn he was trembling. Involuntarily, I glanced seaward and distinguished nothing except a green light. Minute and far away, that might have been the end of the dock. This quote tells the reader that the light is important to Jay Gatsby, but leaves the question, why? With that being said, that isn't the only symbol in the book. In fact, there are many, most of them being colors. Gold represents the wealth in many cases, but also represents failure and death. Gatsby's car is yellow and represents his desire to enter the high-class society of New York, but also shows how badly he has failed at doing so. Nick had to describe the car because saying that it was just a yellow car wasn't enough. It was a yellow car, big yellow car, new. On that note, let's talk about why the color white has had such a big importance. White is often associated with Daisy, which is ironic because white represents innocence and purity, which is the complete opposite of Daisy. Like most other novels, theme is what gives the book a solid base to work from. Without knowing the background of the book and what type of society the characters are living in, the reader is lost. A big theme in The Great Gatsby is the American dream. Well, not really, more like the decline of the American dream. How money and social status takes over the lives of many during the 20s. A great example of the corruption of life is Tom and Daisy Buchanan. The last topic that I'm going to be talking about is what makes Gatsby great in The Great Gatsby. Is it his wealth or his relaxed personality? Let me tell you what I think. He is great because no other person has loved Daisy in the way that he did or felt. Tom, Daisy's husband, experienced the dolorous fear of being somebody ordinary, or felt the same horrible hollowness amid the drinking and partying. He did not truly love Daisy, which is why it's a shame that she chose him.
I'll be talking about the characters. The book's narrator and main character is Nick Carraway. He is from Minnesota and moved to New York City to sell bonds. Due to Nick's honesty and friendships with both the Buchanans and Jay Gatsby, he is often holding secrets from both sides. The title character and a main character is Jay Gatsby, a very wealthy man who throws huge parties every weekend. Later in the story, we found out that Jay Gatsby fell in love with Daisy 5 years earlier, and that before he went to war, he promised to meet her after it. And after the war, Jay Gatsby felt like he wasn't good enough, so he waited to get the money so he would be acceptable for Daisy. After making money as a bootlegger, Gatsby bought a house so that Daisy would be across the bay. Another major character is Daisy Buchanan, Nick's cousin and the one that Gatsby loved. She married Tom Buchanan after the war, waiting for Gatsby to return. Gatsby desires Daisy, and she represents the woman of a wealthy social class. Daisy's husband, Tom Buchanan, is a polo player and he is considered old rich. He hates people like Gatsby because they are new rich. He is shown to be racist and has had many affairs with women. Nick at the end of the story calls the Buchanans careless people. They smashed up things and creatures and then returned back into their vast carelessness, or whatever it was that kept them together, and let other people clean up the mess that they made. Myrtle Wilson is the mistress of Tom Buchanan, and she is married to George Wilson, and she suffers a tragic death at the end of the story. George Wilson is married to Myrtle and runs a gas station in the Valley of Ashes, and he represents the people trapped in the lower to the middle class. Then there is Jordan Baker, a professional golfer. She is a friend of Daisy and casually dates Nick. She also represents women of a particular class in the book. She also has been said not to be honest. I'll be talking about the view of the 20s and Fitzgerald's life. The Great Gatsby is describing what life was like during the Roaring 20s. Fitzgerald shows in the book that the 20s was shown in casual lifestyle and attitudes of wealth and culture. In the 1920s, a lot more people began to have money, which meant that they would spend more money, which is why the book shows the rich lifestyle of the upper class. There were three classes of wealth shown in this book: old rich, new rich, and the poor. The old rich lived in East Egg, the new rich lived in West Egg, and the poor lived in the Valley of Ashes. Everything was about money, as shown by Gatsby telling Daisy to tell Tom that she never loved him, and only loved him because of the money. The culture of the 20s is significant because of the entertainment, traditions, and possessions. F. Scott Fitzgerald was known for his writings during the Jazz Age, which was during the 1920s. The Great Gatsby is showing what life was like for Fitzgerald during the 1920s and how his life reflected to the plot. Fitzgerald compared himself to Jay Gatsby, saying that he was a platonic conception of himself with the American dream.